cross back and forth because they didn't have the right documents. And so their community's been split in half. And it's really terrible. But lots of people in the area are trying really hard to reclaim it because it goes in the middle of their town. And so people have been putting up views on the wall, and they paint huge paintings on the wall, and it's really amazing. But it's making a lot of people. This is on the Mexico side, yes it is. And it goes on and on and on and on and on, which is crazy. This is a big, huge open desert, and one of the things they're running into is things like the big wildcats can't go back and forth anymore. So now their territory has been cut in half. Or where they have their babies, from their food sources because they migrate in the summer and the winter. So it's put a wall right in the middle. It's where the animals go. And then they can't cross back and forth, so you're running into a lot of issues with animals and with natural resources being damaged, and also with the people trying to get across. It's so far and there's no water, so they're having a really hard time. So there you go. Hi. You're excited about the immigration test? No. Well, they're working on that test area.
Can you offer me any information that I can actually use?
If you guys want to take a look at this one.
I don't have anything that I can there, that's something I want. Yeah, you ought to.
They make what you
I don't know. You are right. So, so there's a group of people. And they named themselves after the Minutemen. Because do you remember what the Minutemen's purpose was? Right. So, who did they identify as their people? Who were they trying to protect? Good job. You're so cool. It's amazing. And all of us, believe me. Yeah, they're studying it right now. So there's a group of people that started out in Arizona, California, New Mexico, and Texas, who decided that they felt like they were the new Minutemen. So they took their name. Only they feel like they're supposed to try and protect citizens in the United States from people from Mexico and Central America and South America. And they're not very popular. There's a lot of people in the U.S. who think what they're doing is really bad. They listen to us, and he's one of their leaders, and he also has a retired military. But a lot of the people who organize against them are also retired military. So that's what they're doing. And they carry guns, and they go out into the desert, and you try and find you have to go way out in the desert to get around the wall. That the boundaries that countries draw is more important than the lives of human beings. And there's a lot of this work where people feel like you've got the right to have any other kind of fun, and we can want to change that. What they're standing in is a place called an arroyo. And do you know what an arroyo is?
No.
Right, and when you're in the desert, it's more than that. Water goes when there's floods where water can go out, right? That's what they call it in the Southwest. Do you have a different? No, arroyo. It's the dry riverbeds. Huh? When I first got there, because in the springtime it's when the flash floods, right?
Really?
Because the river goes and the earth is just as dry as it is, and before that, it all runs off really fast. And so where it goes is into these arroyos. And they couldn't figure out why people would lay down in their arroyos and leave all their stuff there. Because it's a lot of stuff that were really uncomfortable and hard, and I realized that this was the only ground because of the water where you could lay down. There wasn't anywhere else that all these people trying to cross could lay down. And because where this is about a 3-day hike from the border, and there's not water resources, people are so tired and so exhausted that they start leaving all of their things. And when we were walking through, it was really, you were able to see the kinds of things that people choose to take with them when they are leaving their old life to try and start a new life, because it's all very small backpacks. There's not any big backpacks like we use when we go to Europe or whatever. Like, they're very small and really very carefully selected things. So you'll have nice clothes that people are planning on wear when they get to the other side, small things of memorabilia from their families, a photograph of wife and kids or something like that, and all of these things are left behind. And it's really hard to see how this much stuff, because it's that many human beings that are crossing through the desert. It's that many human beings who are so tired they have to leave their things. And because of that, groups like No More Deaths has started, and Humanitarian Borders and things like that, that go out and try and bring people water and food and medicine and blankets in the wintertime, because it gets so very cold in the desert, and really because they need it most of the time. And so the Minutemen and those groups are frequently fighting with each other about what the right thing to do. And it's a big debate in the whole country about how do you deal with people who are crossing into the United States without papers. And some say go out and arrest them and court them. And other people say you have to give them food, you have to give them water, you have to give them shelter. Human beings are more important than national boundaries. And who knows who's going to win that debate? Like, we might have opinions, but we don't know. So if you want to look at those, you can. This actually hangs in my kitchen. That's my kitchen mirror. Do you guys have questions on this? This one is kind of a hard one. Because you absorb things more than most. I'm like, what? And a mirror. And the thing, lots of people bring mirrors because if you really get into trouble in the desert, you can signal for help. And because the sunlight reflects off of it, and the helicopters that they use for like to look for people, they'll see the flashing light and be able to help them.
I think the human beings are more important than national boundaries.
I agree with you.
They left all their stuff because they wanted to.
Do you guys want to see something I actually picked up?
They're hers. Oh, they're just kids or like daycare?
No, they're and she homeschools them, and they're geniuses.
It's like red shirts and socks. Yeah, but this
Aren't you a Spanish literature teacher? Yeah, I think I am. I was in the class for a brief moment,
I wonder how we're going to get you up here. See this up here? This is actually something that I picked up in one of those places. We were going through the backpacks and trying to find what things could be cleaned up and given to other people who are about to try and cross, to try and help them be more prepared when they were going through the desert. We went out with two different groups. First time we went out with the Minutemen, and the second time we went out with the Sierra Club to see what different groups' perspectives on the exact same type of information was. And that was enlightening. And when the second time, when we went out with the Sierra Club, what we did was try and clean things up, try and pick the things up out of the desert, and try and return things or give things to future immigrants so that they could be more prepared. And I went through one of the backpacks, and it was full. And inside of this, which if you, well, you can't really see because I'm not taking it down, but this is all handmade, and these are all hand stitched. And inside of it was a big stack of handmade tortillas, which someone had made for their for a person that they loved who was about to try and cross. And the reason that I set this up here with the candles and the crosses and everything in front of it is because this belonged to a real human being who was trying to cross, and we don't know if they made it or not, or if they were picked up and deported, if they're back with their family, or if their family has been able to come and join them up here. And I think it's really important that people recognize how human this issue is, and it's not theoretical, but it's real people. And I want you guys to be able to look at these pictures, so you can take them down and hand them around, and then you can put them back up. These are from a Mayan festival in Portland. There's so many wonderful, beautiful, diverse, rich cultures here that it's important to celebrate and important to recognize. So you guys can take them down and look at it if you want. And they're doing a dance and a festival here, and these beautiful headdresses. And you can take them. This is Maya. And so this is a festival that they just did at Liberty Hall. Oh, I took that picture. Yeah, she's beautiful. This is in El Salvador. What are the most southern places in South America?
And I truly believe that they came and terrorized our community.
You know, yeah, someone's working on this, but isn't it in the Constitution? Everybody wants to say, oh, we got free speech, we got free speech. Well, I got the right to carry a gun, you know. I was trained to use it by the military. It's my right.
And as far as people being afraid, yes, they are afraid, because we have children out here. We have a lot of kids. We have our family out here. And what happens if they decide to go ahead and take laws into their own hand, and something happens with our kids?
Based in the legendary town of Tombstone, organizers expect as many as 1,500 volunteers. Stationed at intervals along 50 miles of the Mexico-Arizona border, they will attempt to detect and report anyone crossing illegally.
Americans to do. It was interesting for me to note how aware the Minuteman not only the Minuteman Project leaders, but also the soldiers, if you will, the volunteers, the volunteer vigilantes, how aware they were of the need to put on a politically correct face for the media so as to advance their agenda of mainstreaming a violent response to immigration issues. They were all aware of the need to play the media game, and they played it fairly well.
All right, now let's talk a little bit about the Minuteman Project. We know that they protected that 20-some-odd mile stretch of Arizona, and now they are joining up forces with California's Friends of the Border Patrol, and they've got their sights on a stretch of land near San Diego.
Yeah, they got about, what are they, about 500, these FBF, Friends of the Border Patrol, and Minutemen have 850, so they're going to combine forces and try to keep California safe. And it's kind of friendly territory because Governor Schwarzenegger has said, I'm for if the Minuteman Project want to come to our neck of the woods. They have to
Voluntary Society, which is basically one of the Supreme Court decisions. That was the first one done, and I had like 30 minutes for like two like huge essays. This would be done like that. I don't even know. I got like a C+ in the class, but I didn't go to a lot of it. I didn't have all the interviews. So I got the opposite. It was a hard class. And so like I was handing the papers to her, and I was all like this, and she must have thought. Probably did. So that's basically where this is at. Study on like Sunday or something. You didn't get background information. This list like everything. Like all the variables that we have to. The reading's gonna kill you. Like you'll start falling asleep because even though it's interesting, it's like it gets boring. 15. Okay, 15. Yeah, that's why I basically do like Monday, Tuesday, 4 or 5. That's true Islam. It looks like that's that one temple with like the yeah, no, there's the little hall, right? Yeah, that's the old temple. That's all the temple. That's the reference of it. See, I got a lot of respect for their, like, all those cultures, that area. She's so sweet. Like, you understand, like, I'm a pretty smart person, and I'm telling you that this is, you're going to sit in front of the essay and just be like,
well, the house is a nice, you gotta be careful with that too, so the city doesn't.
You know what it is? It's like, two things like,
no como mi de desganar, tengo tanto tiempo de edad.
Why did they move to America?
Una traducción, niños, por favor. Una traducción.
There's gotta be just why would you do that? That wouldn't be that.
No, I don't even like. I don't
that's what he did, because he found that I mean,
they're like clothes. Yeah.
We're actually paying out of market. If our lease would run out, if our lease ran out right now, and we're other hospitals. That's what I heard.
Sure. Can you just give a brief introduction? My name is Keegan, and the 7 plus Kylie on occasion took a trip down to the U.S.-Mexico border and along the Kerry and Ann, and there's a few more that are not with us currently.
So we're all kind of prepared to talk about a few different things, but you guys have had an opportunity to look around at some stuff, and I'm wondering if you guys have specific questions about stuff, or if you know a little bit about things.
Start us off.
Okay.
With some stuff.
Can you tell us just what your project was, or what your whole thing's?
Yeah. So we all were students in a class called Pollution Carries No Passport, Sustainability Issues on the U.S.-Mexico Border. And we decided the scope of the class, I mean, the class was brilliant, and it was wonderful, and afforded us an opportunity to go to the border region with the organization called Border Links, but that we really wanted to try and do more with it than that was going to allow us to do. And so we set up our own tour on the side, and had the opportunity to have more personal interaction and small conversations with things to supplement the class that we were taking, but also be able to give more voice of our own opinions than you can when you're in a class and you have to kind of represent a group. So the first place that we went to is called the Great World, and as we have some local experts on everything in the house, actually, do you guys know what sustainability is?
Me neither. Just put that out there.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
as a guest, they had everything. So do you guys know what sustainability? Who would want to try it, or is the big group intimidated too? A little bit. John Paul, do you want to try with sustainability?
Yeah, I can give a description. Well, sustainability can involve lots of different topics. The main three things that people focus on are economics, social sustainability, and environmental sustainability. I know a little bit more about environmental sustainability. Some of them might be able to speak a little bit more on social and economics. But with environmental sustainability, the idea is sustainable would be like a method of using natural resources like water and using it today in a way that you're not using it up for future generations, that you're not degrading the quality of a resource like water, and so that people can continue using it, and it's not going to be a problem for them in the future to figure out new ways to use or to find new resources, because the earth has a certain amount of minerals and a certain amount of water, so we have to take care of these minerals and water so that we have it for lasting generations, and that we're not going to run out of these things. So that's basically what environmental sustainability. I guess economic sustainability is, it can be applied with businesses, that you have business practices that will allow the company to continue being able to run into the future and not go bankrupt, and just have a lasting business, basically. Social sustainability, for me, is a lot more complicated. It can involve lots of things. It's kind of based on equality, based on giving fair wages to workers. I don't know, what else would you add to social sustainability?
Making sure families can stay together.
Right.
I think that's an important thing.
Making sure everyone has a fair voice in day-to-day operations and government operations. Making sure that everything is very socially healthy for the group, like there isn't anyone being denigrated or pushed aside. Everybody's included and everything.
That culture will be lost as well.
The reason that we were looking at this stuff is because these three types of sustainability are really, these three issues are really having a big problem right now on the border between the U.S. and Mexico. There's some big problems with all of those things. There's, when we were over there and we were looking at the pictures and we were talking about the wall that went right through the middle of the Native American lands, and how communities are being divided and people can't go back and forth. And one of you, I think, looked at me and said, I think human lives are more important than national boundaries. you're right. Like, we're just in agreement. But it is a really big debate right now. So what we did was go down to take a look at what are people fighting about, and what are the arguments that they're using, and how much real information are we getting up here from the media, and to try and get some human real stories behind it. So that was the idea of our trip.
How long were you there?
We spent 5 days in the, I'll probably end up being the default speaker, that's terrible. I just don't shut up. We spent 5 days actually in the border region, but the entire trip was 2 weeks long. So 5 days with border links in the class, but 2 weeks including our journey and our research, and just a day of having fun, because we needed that. We were going to cry. So 2 weeks. Well, I want to actually talk to you guys about the Minutemen, because I took these guys around earlier and explained the tables to them, and they started asking me some pretty serious questions. So I've been thinking about it a lot, and how you explain the Minutemen to them. And then I started thinking about how it's explained to us, and how much information we actually get, and how much we don't. So, who told me earlier what Minutemen were? It was what?
In the Revolutionary War, yes, I told you.
Will you tell me what they were in the Revolutionary War again?
Well, they were men, they were called Minutemen because when it was time for battle, they were ready for battle in 1 minute.
And who were they fighting?
They were fighting against Great Britain.
And what were they trying to protect?
They were trying to protect America.
So what parts of America were they trying?
The whole eastern seaboard, because it was only 13 colonies at that time.
Right, and you were talking about protecting freedom and liberty and stuff like that.
Yes, they were trying to gain freedom because the British people were not giving them necessary liberty.
Right.
And they had representation, but the representation was always outvoted by the people of Great Britain.
Right.
Who set up to be that way.
It was set up to be that way, which is a pretty important point. Seems so cool. I didn't know all that. So the modern Minutemen have taken this name because they view themselves as people who are defending our borders. And in the news up here, you'll either get these are terrible, bad people who are doing terrible, bad things, or you'll get these are good people who are protecting our country, and you believe one or the other, and there's not a lot in between. And when we went down, we were invited to a training day for the Minutemen at 3 Points Ranch, which is their base of operations, or it's like Bat Cave kind of for them. And we met with the leadership, and they explained to us kind of their perspective on things, and then they took us out on a trail that immigrants used to cross into the United States. And a lot of the things that we saw there we weren't expecting to see, and we weren't prepared to see. When they were talking about environmental degradation and things like that, I expected to see litter, like trash and things or people chomping on plants and stuff like that. But I was completely unprepared to see thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of backpacks and socks and unopened containers of food and water, and photographs and love letters and like things that human beings own and carry. And earlier when you guys were pointing at the stuff in the pictures, asking me about the specific things they brought, you're like, look, this is toothpaste. These are the things that people have chosen to start their new lives with. And they're so far in the desert and they're so tired that they can't carry them any farther. But from the point of view of people down there, there's thousands and thousands of backpacks and pants and shoes and toothpaste showing up in their yard where their animals are, where they keep their ranches, and they don't know what to do about it. Every time they get cleaned up, all this stuff keeps coming back. And they find all kinds of things out there that you might not want to. And so they have a big problem and they don't know what to do about it. So the problem is really complicated. And even if we don't agree with what their response is, the problem that they see is really valid, and there's nothing that's being done right now to address it, nothing real. Building that wall isn't keeping anyone out of the country. It's just increasing the danger that they face in trying to cross. So, but they also told us a lot of things that weren't true, like just really that were just lies. They told us things that were just lies. And they said things like crime rates were going up and there was more violence. But we went and looked it up, and it's not true. The higher the immigrant rate, the lower the crime rate, which was pretty cool and goes against a lot of things that you hear in the media. So there are a lot of perspectives, but we have to be really careful about what we accept as true and what we just assume is true. That was a big thing for me. And I told you guys this story, but there's a cloth hanging up over there that's all got flowers on it. When we were out on one of those trails with the Sierra Club the second time we went out, we were picking up backpacks, things to try and recycle and give back to other immigrants to help them be more prepared in crossing and to pick up garbage and to really try and imagine who the human beings were that we're walking through. And I found that. And it was in a backpack, and it was a full backpack. It had like the clothes that someone was going to wear when they got crossing it. It had a photograph in there. It had like very, very personal things. And that's a handmade cloth, and it was wrapped around a stack of fresh baked tortillas, and they weren't very old. I mean, they couldn't have been more than 4 days old, but maybe not even that old. And I just started bawling because someone had made this food that they hoped was going to carry their loved one through the desert. And that's a real human being, and we don't know who did it. We don't know if they've been deported. We don't know if they're here, if their families have come to join them, if what's going on. We just don't know. And I want people to look at it, and like there's oil stains from the tortillas on it. You know, it's very real human things. And I think what people forget is that numbers are made of bodies, and families, and stories, and fears, and that's lost. And I think if it were less lost, we would have less of a problem. So, do you guys want to share some of the big things with you?
Well, I mentioned this in one of the meetings, but for me, I haven't been to the Southwest in a long time. I haven't explored it much, and I was just amazed by the beauty of the landscape, and I was saddened by the fact that the migrants that were crossing would never have that perspective. They would probably have the opposite perspective and think of it as a hell where they're dying and trying to get into the U.S. and they would never be able to accept the beauty of this really fragile desert and really just beautiful landscape.
One thing that kind of hit home for me was when we were out at the Sierra Club, I was picking through some stuff, and I found a receipt that had been printed 2 days before, and we were actually on the Mexico side of the border 2 days before that. So we might have seen the owner of that receipt walking down the street, and we would have noticed. And like in a time when we just hopped in our van and crossed the border, flashed our passports, and got through just fine, they were walking, and it was hot, and they were having a much harder time than we were. And that's one of the things that really stuck out for me.
I think another thing was the strength of the families that we stayed with in Mexico. There's just a lot of love in their families. That's first priority. The work that they did to bring them up to like their living status was amazing. Most of these people this was a nicer colonia in the area, but it was nicer because everyone there built their homes. It started with like pallets, and they built it into nice 2-story houses, and it was all through their work. They had to lay the plumbing, they had to do the electricity. Then once they laid the plumbing, then the city came and it connected them to the greater infrastructure. But they laid out all the infrastructure in the neighborhood, and that created like further bonds with the community, and that was really amazing.
Does anyone want to talk about No More Deaths and that time? There's a group called No More Deaths, and they go out and they put out water and they have tents set up on the Mexico side of the border so that when the people who've been picked up in the desert, when the Border Patrol finds them in the desert, they bring them back to Mexico, and then they have this tent, and they give them food and emergency medical care and water, and try and help figure out where to get people and how to keep them safe and everything. And so we got to go there and talk to people when they cross back into the U.S. So they got some stuff. Cross back into Mexico. They got some, they got some stuff, and then some of them were nice enough to sit down and actually talk to us and tell us their stories. And the thing that I can't shake in my head is that all the stories, if they'd set out with 50, only 25 of them had made it back. If they'd set out, like every time it was half, just half. And there has to be a problem when building this fence makes sense when only half make it. And that half is gonna try again, because a lot of things that we heard and we learned about is that like people decide that their families need money and they need support and they need help. So they borrow money to take an airplane up to the northern part of Mexico if they're starting from somewhere really far south to try and save their strength for the journey through the desert, because the trip through Mexico can also be really dangerous and violent. They go into debt and they'll put their homes or their land up as collateral for the money to get these tickets. And so if they get picked up and sent back, they just can't go home. First, they have no way to get there except walking, which could take forever. But second, if they went back, they would just lose the homes and their land where the family that they left behind is. So they have to keep trying to cross. They have no choice. They have to keep trying to cross. And so if they get sent back, they just have to keep trying until they either make it through or they don't, or they're arrested, or whatever happens. There isn't any options left. And so we're not dealing with a population that's just like, oh, I feel like leaving my culture. I feel like leaving my children and my wife or my husband. I feel like leaving the language and where I have the rights of a citizen to walk outside. And, I feel like leaving these things, for funsies. Like it just doesn't happen. And so about the time that the decision has been made that people are going to try and walk through the desert with no access to water for days on end, it's not like driving them back to the border and making them walk across is going to be an effective solution. And right now they've built a wall through Baghdad, and they've built a wall through. There's a wall separating a lot of communities in this world. It's not like this is an issue we're just dealing with here. There's walls separating so many communities in the world. And why is that an acceptable solution? Why is that the answer that we give out? Why is it that a line that governments have drawn is more valuable than the rights of communities to exist and the rights of families to be together? And why aren't we louder about how wrong that is? I'd like an answer.
A lot of places in the world, walls are built because the people on either side have a lot of trouble getting along. Or at least the people who govern those people have a lot of trouble getting along. And that's certainly true. Here, between the US and Mexico, it's a little different. Certainly, we don't have as much trouble getting along when we're in communities together. It's a broad-scale issue of how much we have. Because up here we have a lot, and some of us have a lot, and some of us feel like we don't have a lot. Certainly when we look around, it's easy to find people that have so much money to spend, so much money to simply throw away. And you'll find the same sorts of differences. In Mexico, there's a lot of people that have a lot for down there, and a lot of people that have not so much. But here in the US, we're here and we see these rich people that have a lot. But down in Mexico, there's so many people that have so little to keep them alive, so little food, so little money. And we see that played out on the border in a grand scale. The difference between people who don't have much and people who have much. And it's really easy to understand why a lot of people feel like they deserve a piece of the pie. You know, what we have here in the United States is something funny, because we call it the American dream. And yet, the Americas start practically in the North Pole, in the north of Canada, and go all the way down to Tierra del Fuego in South America. So why is the American dream something that we only have here in the US? Why do we get to keep that all to ourselves? How is that ours? The truth is, we haven't been sharing very much. And we have companies here in the US. We have companies here in the US who get to go down to the other countries and do business down there. And they don't share a lot of the money that they make here in the US with the people that work for them in Mexico, in Central America, in South America. But the people who work for them share the fruits of their labor. And fruits is a good term for it. If you've ever eaten a banana, it wasn't grown in the United States, you know? Don't drink coffee. But it wasn't grown in the United States. There's so much that we get to take from down there, and we, meaning companies, and bring here to the United States. And the companies that do it, they make a lot of money taking that stuff and bringing it up here. And they get to keep the money, the people who own those companies, who run those companies. And the money doesn't go back there, and it doesn't build houses for the people who work for them. It hardly gives them enough money to buy the food that they eat. And that's the problem that we see. And it's very apparent on the border and very apparent anywhere further south that you go, that the money that's being made isn't getting shared. And wow, what can we do about that? The funny thing is, the government seems to be focusing on making sure that the businesses get to do whatever they need to make the most money. And they don't seem to be focusing at all on who gets that money. And the problem that we're seeing is that it's making people, mostly here in the United States, really, really rich. That they have so much money they can just throw it away. And making people down there really, really poor. They hardly have enough money to buy the food so they can eat. There's not really an easy answer to that. No, wait, there is. we need to talk. We need to get involved with our governments and make sure that the way things get traded across borders is fair to people on both sides. And that's not happening just yet. And the reason why we're here doing this and giving this presentation is so that people do talk about it more. We visited a state representative in Arizona, and she asked us, have any of you considered running for office? Many of us here in college, here in Portland, here in the United States, are so fed up with the way things are that we kind of throw up our hands. We say there's nothing we can do about it. You know, we need to work our jobs. You know, we need to live our own lives. We get angry about the way things are, but we don't feel like we're empowered. Well, it's easy to feel that way, and it's true to a certain extent, but it's not true. If we can all make a point of getting involved and talking about these things, and hopefully doing a little bit more than just talking, then we really can change the situation here in the States, internationally, the way things are traded between countries, so that everybody gets to share in the American dream. It shouldn't just belong to us in the United States.
Hey guys, will you guys tell me again what the American dream is? You were telling me about it earlier.
Have a better life.
What else?
To have a home. And to have freedom.
What did you just say?
To have an education.
To have an education? We all envy yours. Seriously. What else? What are the things that are important to you?
To have enough money to just buy the things that we need. Things that, just enough money to get the things that we need, the necessities of life.
Do you think everyone in the whole world has those needs too?
Yes, everybody has needs, but some don't get it. Some don't get it.
So maybe we could have it not be called the American dream anymore, but it could be just like the human dream or the people dream or something like that. And everyone could get it.
The world dream.
The world dream, that's a very good way to call it. Yeah. So one of the things that Kirsten Sinema showed us was you all passed the immigration test, so it's legislation. I'm not going to worry about trying to make this sound too simple because you know it all better than we do. And the Minutemen actually introduced two pieces of legislation, and one's called SOUL and one's called SLAW. And does someone want to hit on those a little bit? Please.
Correct me if I'm thinking of a different one because I don't actually remember which was which, but wasn't one of them dealing with healthcare workers and having or making it the law that the healthcare workers had to check your identification status before giving you aid because it was illegal to give aid to
So it was not only that, but that it would give the power for law enforcement to check anybody and basically at random whether if they're a citizen or not. Like, you could get pulled over for speeding ticket and you would be requested for your citizenship.
Worse than that, but if they didn't, this is SOUL, and it's support our law enforcement is what it's called. Although the law enforcement has already come out heartily opposed to it. And what it means is that any state service, anything that receives state's money, libraries, hospitals, bus drivers, schools, everything. If you don't check and pursue to verify the status, the legal documentation status of people, and you end up providing services to anyone that isn't documented, you lose all your state funding. So, when Kirsten Sinema was explaining this to us, she said, what that means is that if you go to the hospital, you better have your passport and your birth certificate and things like that on you. You better be able to verify that these things are yours and real. Because if they serve you and you don't have it, the hospital loses all its state funding. And she asked us whether we thought it was fair that if we went to the hospital, if our kids went to the hospital, that they would have to wait until someone could find their birth certificate and prove that they were citizens before they got service.
If you're having a heart attack or a stroke
and you're not carrying it, that's it.
You died
because
you didn't have your papers on you.
So
was this legislation in Arizona?
Arizona, right? But they're looking at it. It's a lot of things have started there and spread out.
California right now.
And they've passed in Arizona?
No, they were introduced actually the week that we were down there. So they're still. It hasn't happened yet. We need to be watching them. And SLAW is terrible. Also, it means that if you're a business and you're caught employing anyone without documents, it's a zero-strike policy, so you immediately lose your license to do business in the state. That's it. You're done. Out. And if you wanna start business up again, you have to leave the state. So, not surprisingly, the Business Association has come out really strongly against this. They're like, "Are you kidding?"
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's not going to work out for people so well. But I mean, things like this are happening all over, and California actually has passed some terrible ones. But you see aspects of it everywhere in English-only legislation in schools, in things that are even I don't know if they're coming up here right now or they are expected to be coming up here soon. But things that say, oh no, it was someone on campus trying to get signatures for a bill that would limit English support for school children 2 years, which means after you had been in the US for 2 years, there would be no more help in your language. You had to take everything in straight English. So,
and I don't know about you, but I've taken a whole bunch of languages in more than 2 years, and I still can't speak any. So,
and I have actually lived in a Spanish-speaking country for more than 2 years. My Spanish is pretty good, but I couldn't take physics in it. Like, there's no way. I would never be able to excel as a student if that were the case. And both of them passed. If that passed and like Seoul passed, then if they provided any support for me, or if I didn't have my papers, even if I could speak English, the school would lose its funding, which means that children of undocumented workers don't have the right to go to school. And as much as we would all love to have your mom and have her teach us the amazing way that she teaches you, lots of people are doing the very, very best that they can and can't quite provide the level of education. The school system can't quite provide the level of education that you've received. So it's a really big problem that we're looking at right now.
The second one was SLAW. And Kirstensen was saying if that passed, the state facility, the building that the state representatives work in, would actually have to be shut down because there's migrant workers that are doing all on the janitorial staff there. So it would basically shut down the state House of Representatives.
Immediately, yes. It's pretty amazing. So there's some really big things happening now. Good question.
The First Amendment says you can petition the government, but it seems that if you petition the government for certain things, like what we want, like what we're for, we petition the government for that. It violates the 9th Amendment, and that says that the Constitution the government isn't allowed to tell people they can't the government can't tell the people, like, say that it doesn't say in the Bill of Rights that you have a right to shoot Mexican people who are going across the wall. And
you're totally right, Dad.
but it says that it's not allowed to stop people from retaining their own rights as long as they're not really bad. For example, the Minutemen are doing some really bad stuff, and you can't. It seems like if you petition the government, then it'll violate their rights, and so it's all just messed up.
You have a clear analysis of the people. It's true, and you're absolutely right, sweetheart. You're absolutely right. So they're saying that the official position, and you can go to their website, and in the very eloquent speech that was given to us, that they would never hurt anyone. They'll tell you that they would never hurt anyone, that they only go out to try and find people so they aren't hurt in the desert, and they don't like it that people die in the desert either. They also say they're against that. Now there's a lot of questions around them and their actions, and a lot of questions about that. So, but there's clearly some people in the desert that are doing that are shooting people that you're talking about. And what the Minutemen and other groups are saying is that they have a right to protect their families, and they have a right to protect their lands, and they are just trying to help support the Border Patrol in doing their jobs because there's not enough Border Patrol. And they said that the government has failed to protect us, and that they're trying to do that to help them. And other people are saying, but by you doing that, you're infringing on the rights of other people, basic human rights to have water and be safe and not be shot. And I've been totally avoiding the word the whole time. And so that is a really big debate right now. Sometimes laws pass and they're shot down because they say that they're not constitutional because it does go against the First and Ninth Amendments. So yeah, it is a really big debate, and you're right, it's all messed up. It's all messed up right now, and a lot of times people don't have nearly as much information as you do, and really, we just spent a bunch of time down there, and although we might have some strong opinions on things, I'm not sure that we're all that clear on what all the things are either. It's really confusing and it's really complicated. And when you get old enough to run for office, you make sure to call, because I love to work on your campaign. There's a lot of, all right, so in organizations, when you have a lot of people that are members of them, some people do one thing and some people do another, right? And so even though there might be some individuals who are doing really terrible things, and you're right, they're really terrible and there's nothing right about it, and when you were looking at those pictures and you said that it looked so sad, you're right, it is really sad. But there are other people who are involved who don't do those terrible things. They believe someone when they tell them that what they're doing is trying to protect people, and they don't really have a lot of other options because there's not very much organized response down there. People keep focusing on how to stop immigration. What's the big quote on that one? Trying to stop immigration is like trying to stop a hurricane. Is that what that was?
Close enough.
I mean, it's something like that. They're not really looking at what's causing immigration. They're just trying to deal with, because they identify the problem as all these people coming across. So if that's what you see as the problem, then trying to stop it seems like a reasonable solution. Or that they can't be talked to, or that with more information their minds can't be changed. Because I bet you most people are good, and if they had access to the real information that was there and they saw another solution that might work, then I bet you they would change their tactic. So don't give up on them all just yet.
Our country did get populated by immigrants.
Yes, it did, exactly. Told you. Who else is on his campaign at this point?
I'll run it. I promise I'll get you elected.
It's true, he did just get Rudy elected, so Rudy's amazing. You're right, our country was populated by immigrants, and if more people thought about that, I mean, who here, one of you guys is part Mayan? Who's part Mayan? That's you? Y'all are part Mayan? What other places, like, what other heritage do you guys have?
Irish.
Irish?
English. Norwegian.
Spanish, Filipino, Portuguese, and yeah, that's it.
Basque, Italian, Mexican. So, right, like we all come from all these different places, and a lot of times people forget that just because they were born here, that pretty recently we were immigrants too. Oh, there's a big thing about that that's coming up right now. So there's another thing that same guy was having people sign. And a big push in Arizona to repeal the 14th Amendment, which is the thing, and you guys know what that is because one of you wrote it down on your immigration test. So it's the thing that that not only ended slavery, but also
The 13th Amendment ended slavery. The 14th made black citizens.
Yep. So people who are born in the United States are citizens, which is, you know, a way that we could look at really integrating descendants into the U.S. As citizens with full citizenship rights. So they're trying to take that away and make it so that children of immigrants don't immediately have U.S. citizenship status. So now all these things are happening, and I see a lot of really angry head shaking right now, but this is happening, and a lot of us don't know about it, and we're also not freaking out and stopping it. So, like, all this stuff is happening. And the loudest, most angry voice in the room, do you want to introduce yourself, by the way? You've been a great speaker.
My name is Kieran. I'm 9 years old. And I've been homeschooled by my mom. She teaches me a lot. I get some of my information from the internet, and most of it she teaches me.
She does a great job. So,
we've been studying the Constitution and the government right now.
It's a really important thing to know. Maybe we should all do that.
I don't think I've ever done that, and I should. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? That was such a good one.
What are your next plans as this group that went? Do you have?
We like to get together and argue about things. One thing I was just thinking of was how effective the Minutemen have been at organizing politically. How they get their messages out there and they get people to say, yeah, they're right. And they get people on the phone and they get people to email and they get people to call their senators and their congressmen and they get people to join their organization and make trips to the border, people who live far away and who should be as uninvolved with these issues as many of us often feel here in Oregon so far away from the border. But here we are caring about it. Let's organize something. But what? What can we do? I mean, we can fight the kind of legislation that we're seeing out of this, but who are we going to ask to make the world a fairer place? And if it's our senators and our congresspeople, what should we ask them? I'm open to the audience for suggestions right now. What should we do? How can we make the world a fairer place? How can we remove the root causes of the issues that we're looking at here? Any ideas?
Because everyone's been working on that one, so just off the top of your head.
I'm more and more coming to the opinion that that truly sustainable communities, ecologically, economically, and socially sustainable communities are local. I know for a fact that globally we're doing agriculture all wrong, and that may be the place to start, but I think whatever we do needs to be focused in the local. Think globally, act locally. I mean, it's a cliche because it's really quite true.
We had a kind of a series of hands.
Well, I think what you've done here tonight is make it more personal. And I think that's what people have to see, because when these people are calling, they're talking about the issues and they're not talking about people. And so it's really easy to stir someone up that's going to take action because they're not thinking about it in a personal way. And I think that's one thing that people have to see, and I haven't seen any of that because I haven't taken a stand one way or the other myself because I hear all of the input. Like you said, their message comes across loud and clear. And you don't hear that personal side. And one thing I was curious about, is there anybody taking something like this around to our public schools? Because children are a big answer. When we take this around and we educate the children and the children talk to their parents, and I mean, I'm not saying we have to write our legislators and we have to do all these things, but until the majority of the people see it from a personal level and see people, individuals, rather than issues, we're not going to get through to a lot of people.
There isn't at this point, but if anyone does it, then we're on it. 1, 2, and 3, 4. So go for it.
The Eighth Amendment says excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel or unusual punishments inflicted. I think the last part of the Eighth Amendment is being violated in a certain way because, like you said, those two laws that the Minutemen made, thing about if you want to get medical care, you have to have all these papers and stuff. But I think that's kind of a cruel or unusual punishment because it's kind of a punishment because the Mexicans came over here, and then so what they do is they just say, okay, you have to have everything, all your papers and everything, so you can get a heart problem taken care of or something. And I think that's wrong. I think that's very cruel.
And it hasn't passed. And if it does, there's no guarantee that it won't be considered against the Constitution. But you of all people should, write something up, work with your mom, work with your brothers and sisters, because they're all geniuses, and really come up with presenting something. And then maybe besides bringing stuff to children, we should start bringing children to the legislator, and maybe we can have a field trip to Salem. I think it'd be fun. And Brad.
That was a really good
That was really
I've never actually thought about that sort of thing as violating the Constitution, but I like your analysis.
I think that instead of talking so much about it, I think we should act on it.
Which is why we're all voting for you. And your mom. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Amy, regarding, you were talking about why are people coming across the border and why are poor people leaving their homes. And a big part of that is, like you said, United States agricultural policy and its effect on the global agricultural community plays a huge part in why people in Mexico are poor, considering that their main source of income is oftentimes agricultural. And the United States Farm Bill is coming up for revisitation. It comes up for revisitation about every 4 or 5 years. And most of what's in that bill is totally archaic language that came up during the New Deal when they were trying to figure out farm subsidies and what's going to go on with the Dust Bowl and all these problems that happened back in the 30s and 40s. And now it's determined largely behind closed doors by agribusiness interests, and most senators don't understand the language and don't understand what that bill is about, and that has a huge effect on agricultural policies and why people in the rest of the world are poor. And so I think that attempting to find out more about that and educate people about that bill and trying to change it would be a huge step forward in fixing that.
That's a great idea. And I just want to rewind and make sure everyone knows, in the US we've got a lot of farmland and we make a lot of wheat and a lot of corn, and the government subsidizes, that gives money to the businesses who do that. And so, relatively speaking, they can grow all of those crops for really cheap and send them wherever they want, any place else in the world. In Mexico, for instance, the government can't help the farmers. So the farmers struggle on their own. And they've been getting by okay until trade laws changed so that there was no longer a way to tax the crops that were coming from the US going down into Mexico. And so now the wheat and the corn that the businesses can grow for really cheap in the US gets exported down to Mexico, where it actually costs less than the wheat and the corn that they can grow down there. And so all of the farms down there are going out of business because the people can buy wheat and corn and products made from them from the US for less than the ones that are made in Mexico. And that's why a lot of farms have closed, essentially. And that's why another reason why there's so many poor people that need to go somewhere else to find jobs.
One of the other big things that happened was, especially with the corn, is that there's 3 really big tortilla companies in Mexico, and they just bought up a lot of corn because people eat a lot of tortillas. A lot of them. And for a long time, there was a law in Mexico that made sure that any company, it didn't matter where it was from, had to buy like 95% more or less local corn. So all these farmers had a guaranteed buyer for their corn, so they'd grow it. So even if the company was a U.S. company or from somewhere else, they would have to buy their corn from local farmers. But with the trade agreement called NAFTA, which is the North American Free Trade Agreement between Mexico, U.S., and Canada, they took away that protection and called it something like a non-tariff trade barrier. So it was something that prevented them from making a profit other than a tariff, the amount of money for importing stuff or exporting. And so it's cheaper to buy the subsidized corn from the U.S. So it's not just the corn that's grown here going down there cheaper, but it's also taking away all the laws that the local government had to protect their industries. And that's a lot, but you probably have it clear.
I have a couple of things to say. In regards to relating to this issue and people getting angry and getting involved, it's really easy to distance yourself from this issue when you were born in this country and you were raised speaking English and you were raised in wherever, in urban areas, suburbia, you were raised inside the culture of this country. One thing that was helpful for me is, and maybe this is not an option available to everyone in this room, go speak to your grandparents, because most people are not more than third generation Americans. My family came over to this country in 1920 or so. If it weren't for open immigration laws of 7 or 8 decades ago, most of us would not be here. We would not be Americans. We would not enjoy the lovely life that we are allowed to live in this country. And that's hard to remember unless you go back and you speak to the generations previous to you, if you still have access to them. They can tell you what it was like. They can tell you what it was like living in Soviet Russia in 1922. They can tell you what it was like living wherever in 1925 before they came to this country. In regards to helping this matter, I think a lot of people alluded to this, you included Annie. This is not a legal issue. This is not a border patrol issue. This is an economic issue. People are coming here because they're poor in their country, and they're coming here in search of a better life. This issue needs to be fixed on an economic scale inside the countries where this is happening. And this is going to be a horribly, horribly unpopular opinion in this room, so please be easy on me. Free trade and the outsourcing of jobs helps this in the long run. NAFTA has hurt this in the short term. I know it has. But in the long run, free trade comes back around to help this problem, because inevitably, when Mexican consumers are paying less for corn from U.S. countries, they have more money to spend on other things. When Mexico agro-businesses, the 3 companies that produce tortillas, when they can get corn to make their tortillas at a vastly cheaper price from a U.S. company, they have more money to pay their workers, they have more money to expand into new factories, new businesses. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen in 5 years or 10 years. It's going to take 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. But in the long run, free trade and outsourcing jobs to these companies, to these countries, is going to come back around to raise the level of the standard of living for everyone. Global economies work, and protectionist economies inevitably fail. It's been shown time and time again.
There's a lot of things around this, and so before we get into a big economic argument, which I'm completely for, I'm totally for, so let's go do that. There's a lot of assumptions in everything involving economics, right? Like we're in an economics class together, and today the teacher said, this is economics, assume everything else remains static. Like, just pretend these things don't change because this model works, but only if these things don't change. So before we get into a big economics things, if you guys want to do short responses, but I don't, no, 9. So go for it. But let's not have NAFTA's good, NAFTA's bad.
Crazy. Anyway, I think the one huge issue with what you were saying is that why U.S. corn is cheap is because it's subsidized. It's artificially cheap. The government gives our money, our tax-paying money, goes to make that corn cheap, and that's good for agribusiness. It's bad for us, and it's bad for the Mexican economy.
Wait, stop. Hang on a second. Not happening. You guys come up here real quick. Come up here, come here.
whoever the kid was speaking over there, if you want to run for Congress in 2020.
Yeah, totally. No, you guys come here, up here.
What?
Can you just tell everyone your names really quick? Because I've been completely honored to be able to walk around and talk with y'all. You can be sleepy, sweetie. Go for it. Come on front and tell them your names. Will you start for me?
I'm Jackson. My name is Kieran. I'm Alex. I'm Adonis. I'm Rebecca. My name is Kristen.
I'm Mom. Thank you. And thank you for the most attentive, interactive, analytical discussion I've had in a long time. So, can I have a round of applause? It's so far past my time, but thank you for coming. Have a good night.
If nobody immigrated to this country, we'd all be billionaires. What did you say?
Oh, wait, can you explain that?
What did we say?
I think he said nobody immigrated.
If nobody immigrated to this country, we'd all be billionaires.
How come?
Because the United States makes a lot of money. Because the people who make coins and make dollars and stuff, they've been making lots of money. So since they're making lots of money, if nobody immigrated to this country, then all the money would go to just the people that came from England and their descendants and all those people. So we'd all be billionaires because there's lots of money.
I have a quick question for you. When I know that you have to go, but when if you're sitting down at dinner and everyone has a piece of cheesecake, right? And then you guys turn your heads for a minute, and one person ends up with 9 pieces of cheesecake. Who do you think took the cheesecake? No. So probably the person with all the cheesecake, right? So maybe when we look around and we wonder, where did all the money go? Instead of looking at really poor people, we need to look at the ones with all the money.
Push.
So, but we need to go.
Sorry.
Have a good night.
Talking about if we continue to suppress, I'm not sure if everybody got what he was saying, but if we continue to suppress the poor and use them to feed, like somebody had brought up, and keep the money up here. And so he was talking about an injustice. That was cool.
You're amazing.
I wasn't sure.
You're amazing. You're absolutely amazing. You're right.
Okay, I'm proud to say this, even though I'm American, me no gusta los Estados Unidos.
Okay, we can sort of, somebody want to kind of close up, or is there any other burning questions that aren't whether or not corn subsidies work?
Through corn subsidies.
All right. Just stop. This is a really big, complicated debate, and there's a lot of issues, and they're really valid, and there's a lot of perspectives and a lot of models, and they're all really valid. And I encourage you to stay afterwards and have that debate because I want to listen.
I'd like to throw something out there
Okay,
real quick. I'm not one to speak on economics at all, but just as something that I learned, the families that we were staying with, they do all their grocery shopping across the border. They have some special access where they can cross the border, and I think they've had that access for a while, and that's why they're able to do it now. But the reason they do that is because they can't afford to shop in Mexico, and the people that can't cross the border, they're starving. They can't afford to feed themselves. The prices aren't cheaper in Mexico.
It's a terrible situation, and again, I'll point out again that one of the things I reiterated was not that it's not going to be a 5 or 10 year solution. It's going to take a long time.
Is it worth all the suffering to reach that point? I mean, if
do we have
reach that
Trickle down economics is not a viable model.
Is it going to be a series of 5-year plans? And another thing is that if you're suggesting that free trade will take 50 or 100 years. So just let me finish, please. To lift the people that are currently starving out of their circumstances, and that we should impose these neoliberal models on the world to help them. I would like you, as a defender of capitalism and free trade, to don't roll your eyes.
I'm not rolling my eyes at you. I'm rolling my eyes at the fact that I knew this was going to be a horribly unpopular opinion in this room.
Well, you're being challenged on it, so that's fine. Like, you're correct.
Yeah, please continue.
I want you to own up to the millions of deaths that are going to be on the hands of those policies. And when you look at other models and talk about the horrors of socialism, I want you
I'm sorry,
to put it on.
sir. Did I speak about any horrors of socialism?
I think
I'm just asking you to own up to the deaths that are on the hands of those policies.
Do you have a solution that's going to get this done tomorrow?
I'm actually going to stop this real quick because one of the things that's really clear is that I study trade. I would love the opportunity to get into that discussion with you. And as somebody who is frequently on the same side of many issues as I am, who I have respect for as an individual, I would love to have that conversation with you. But this isn't actually necessarily the place for that. And one of the things that became very evident is that there's a lot of different ideas, and there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of different approaches that you can take to get to a solution, and people don't really tend to agree on what that is. I think we can all agree on that one. So, but continue having the conversations and continue exploring it, because we don't have all the information. And for sure, sitting here and looking at models and looking at how things ought to be, when we got there, it didn't match. What we saw with our eyes was different than what we'd been taught. But we also talked to a bunch of people who told us all about what they'd seen with their eyes, and I believe them that they've really seen it, and it was a pile of crap. So just because you have an experience doesn't mean it's fact. It means it's a truth, or a reality, or a perspective, but that doesn't make it fact. So question what you see in all ways. Question it and explore it and find things out and look for it and be open to being right or being wrong or something like that. One thing that you did was point out how effective the Minutemen are in their messaging. And one of the things that happens is this perspective here, not right or left, I'll put it there. This message gets put out, and then people try and counter it with what's reasonable. So the entire frame of public debate is limited from this view to what's reasonable, and this view is lost. It's all lost. So on campus, I look at a lot of very right-wing Christian groups, which I don't not necessarily opposed to, but particular right-wing extremist Christian groups pushing a very, very, very one-sided argument, and the response is always the middle one. And it never includes this anymore, and this is never talked about, and all the solutions that could be here is never talked about, so what you end up with is here. And we need to bring this back into the picture, and we need to be open to talk to people who have different views than us. And when we do find ourselves preaching to the choir, we need to start singing together, and carrying the same message and doing something stronger. So does anyone want to make some closing? You said you were going last, Debbie.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I like talking to people, or with people, but not necessarily to people. But no, thanks so much for coming out, all of you guys, for sure. I think some of us thought that no one was going to show up. And definitely thanks for participating in the debate, and some of you had some really, really good ideas out there, so it's, you know, it isn't just us talking to you, which is definitely appreciated. But yeah, I think Anne basically made a closing statement and then asked me to make another one. But I liked hers better. So.
Is this going to be an annual trip, do you know? Or has this gone on in previous years?
Mm-hmm. It's the second time.
They
The
went.
last one was 2 years ago.
Yeah,
she's planning on doing it yearly, but it won't be us every year.
Right.
It should be.
So it'll be offered.
Real quick, the bill you talked about to remove the naturalized citizen clause from the 14th Amendment, is that under consideration right now?
It's, I wonder if it's been officially, I can get you information on it.
Please do.
Yeah.
You know where to find me.
Yes, I do. I'll even know where to find you in half an hour. There's a big important meeting happening upstairs, so if any of you are students and care about our elections, at 9 o'clock there's a really important meeting, so.
What does that mean?